FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
I just think Machiavelli has been very maligned by history. Because, to put it simply, Machiavelli was not Machiavellian. I mean, his name has come to stand for, cynicism and deviousness and ruthlessness and power politics in general, because of this little book, The Prince, that he wrote. But you have to think about the writing of that book. This is a man who was a profound democrat, who served the city of Florence when it became a republic, when it chased the Medici family out. And when the Medicis came back and regained power, they hated him and they tortured him and almost killed him and then sent him into exile. And he spent the rest of his life being unable to return to his own hometown, having to live in the countryside in exile in a villa. So he had every reason to loathe princes of the Medici kind. And he lived in this period when not just the Medicis, but the Borgias and the Sforzas and all these great families were behaving in the most ruthless way. And he wrote this little treatise about not what he would like things to be like, but how power actually worked, what he observed, the ruthlessness of it. And it's a classic case of shooting the messenger. Here's a man who understood the nature of power and made the mistake of writing it down too clearly and unvarnished and not at all, no soft soaping at all. It's better to be cruel than be kind, he said. There's an extraordinary chapter of advice to rulers taking power, where he says what you should do is do all the worst things you have to do on the first day. Kill everybody you have to kill. Do all the worst things on the first day, because after that, people will say about you, well, he's not as bad as he used to be. and these kinds of, you can't read these observations without seeing a wonderfully brilliant but disenchanted and cynical mind writing about the nature of power. And for that to be read straight, and for people to then accuse him of having created the handbook, it's very unjust. And Machiavelli was quite a sweet man. He was very good looking. He was a philanderer, that's true. He was serially unfaithful to his wife, who was very loving of him. But he wrote the greatest comedy of the Renaissance. His play, The Mandrake Root, La Mandragola, was the most successful comedy written in the Renaissance. He was also a bit of a party animal. I mean, there's a wonderful letter that has survived from another friend of his called Agostino Vespucci, who was also in the novel. He's the third of these three friends, the Janissary soldier who's called Argadia.
Cousin of Amerigo Vespucci. Who is a cousin of Amerigo Vespucci.
Well, it's true, the Vespuccis in Florence were a very large family, and he was a distant cousin of Amerigo Vespucci. He really existed, and he didn't know him very well, but they were related. Anyway, there's a letter from Agostino Vespucci to Machiavelli when Machiavelli is out of town on Florentine government business, I think in Rome or somewhere. And it says, would you please come back quickly? Because when you're not here, there's nobody to organize the fun. And he was clear that was who he was. He was the life and soul of the party. So I just thought, this guy's had a really bad rap.
I'm sensing an identification here.
Well, that's so astute of you.
Well, you said you're all the characters.
Yeah. No, but it is true. I mean, actually, I came across all this stuff about Machiavelli really when I was studying history at Cambridge, and long before I'd been, myself the target of some, what shall I say, falsifications. And I'd always thought then that it's kind of strange that this man who is really very likable has come to stand for much that is not very likable. And then many years later, that kind of something like that demonization process happened to me. And yes, it did truthfully increase my interest in writing about him. Because I thought maybe, 400 years from now, somebody will do the same thing for me.
Also,
it takes about 400 years. It took 400 years for the Vatican to admit it was wrong about Galileo. 400 years later, they said, oh yeah, it's true that the Earth goes around the sun. That's how long it took the Pope to notice that.